Get to one of our favorite players on the show, Brian Christopherson, Husker247, joining us now. BC, what's going on, bud?
Not a lot. How are you guys doing?
We're good. We're good. We saved all our recruiting juice for
Oh
you.
no.
Aren't you happy? Because this is the
I'll
questions that
try.
we keep getting. Ravi was already mad, and I haven't been in the greatest of moods. So I told myself today, I'm not going to contribute to his delinquency. I will be the positive one.
What'd I do?
But he's upset that folks are panicking over 2026 recruiting class already. I didn't have any tidbits for him because I said, you know what? We're going to talk to a guy that's a heck of a lot smarter than me. I'll let BC figure out if he's panicking over the 2026 class.
I'm not panicking. As you guys know, I'm pretty good at sitting on the fence on things, and this would be one where I'll just sit on that middle ground with it. I mean, I understand where there's a little bit of like, oh man, it's getting into June a decent ways, and they're ranked 74th and all that. But I also don't know if I'm looking at their rankings quite the same way this year as in past years. And part of that is I'm still kind of figuring out like how like your natural recruiting class can be complemented by sort of what you supplement it with in December with some extra pieces and how that all fits together. And so it's not as easy for me as it used to be when we just basically had the class, and that's how you judged how the roster was put together. Just a recruiting class out of high school alone, it's like, oh, if they were like 55th, you felt kind of down about it because there weren't other options to add anywhere else. So in this day and age, I'm still kind of trying to work out what the exact calculus is on like, okay, let's say you did have a recruiting class that ends up like 45th, but you add the two or three pieces at a different point that fit the puzzle really well. Well, then you're fine. So that's where I'm at with it. And there's still time to go. Obviously, they've got a big weekend ahead with 8 or 9 guys I think are coming in at this point. We'll see if that's always fluid, but I like the list. I think there's a couple from the last weekend still that visited that could be added to the commit list. So I would tell people, and it's not the popular answer, just have a little patience with it, and let's see where we are in like a couple weeks, and then we'll have a little more information, and then you go from there.
Let me ask you something, BC. What's um, how do I want to ask this without it being a leading question? Nebraska has a really young roster, okay?
Hmm.
Between
Exactly.
freshmen, redshirt freshmen, and however you want to classify the sophomore class in terms of rosters. How do you think that affects not only Nebraska's how they value this year's high school class or what they think they need to do with this year's high school class, but what this high school class thinks when they see the youth on the roster?
Yeah. That's not a leading question. That's a big part of like I think what's going on. I know when Rhule did an interview earlier this spring and talked about recruiting in this climate, I think he used the number at that time, and maybe it shifted. Like you'd like to get about 15 out of high school in each class in this day and age. So we've already dropped the number maybe from what it used to be where we were at one point when I started doing this we were talking about like classes of 25 or at least 20 people. Well, it was already down to 15, and then you I think bring up a good point. This is a really young roster, and the last thing you want to do first off as a coaching staff is force guys just force it into when you're working to a 105 where you're like we're going to try to make this fit but we're not quite sure about it. Anybody that is committing or joining your class, I think especially now, you have to feel really strongly like this is a guy we truly believe it can develop within this, and can do it as a guy who loves football. He's just going to commit fully toward the process of being a good player. And then I think the other part of it is, yeah, there are probably some recruits here and there that might look at it and be like, they do have a lot of young guys who really study their roster. And maybe that factors into their opinion a little bit. But I would tell people it was going to be a smaller class to begin with. We got to get a little bit more used to that. And also, let's see how it plays out with these last, couple weeks of June too, because it could fill in a lot more toward sort of the whole of the pie as they want it.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson, Husker247. BC, as you kind of look at the way this is playing out, you mentioned this a little bit, but if you're taking a smaller class, I mean, I think we're looking at like 12, somewhere in that range. I think it is probably
exactly.
down from the 15 even that we were talking about in the or whenever Coach Rhule was talking about the 15 in the spring or whatever. But like if you're talking about 10, 12, 14 guys, whatever the number is, like your ceiling is already 40th or 50th in the country just based on quantity and what other people are going to do. And historically, that speaking is kind of what I'm looking at from your guys' team rankings. So if we're not looking at to overall team rankings, because it doesn't really make sense when you're not considering quantity. And I think there is some hesitancy, at least from DB and myself, to rely too heavily on rankings when you're talking about a high 3 versus a low 4, because that can basically be insignificant in terms of the difference. How are you sort of evaluating what this class ends up being when you're looking at guys? Do you just really have to dive into the tape on like an individual basis, or how are you going about that?
Yeah, and also just like who this staff, you get a sense as the recruiting process goes along, like who the staff is really invested in or maybe has near the top of their board. And I think this is a staff. I usually give them the benefit of the doubt. You want a good example? CJ Brownell, would be that of somebody that they were in on very quickly, and then the in-state schools really turned up the heat. And of course, now he's decommitted, and we'll see where he ends up.
As story goes, he may go right back to check out Florida again too, because he didn't love it the first time, but even they've circled back.
Yeah, I think some of our Florida guys think they got a good shot at him, so we'll see where that ends up. But he's a good example of this staff. Why I do give them the benefit of the doubt with evaluations. I think they've proven that they are pretty good at figuring out traits and what works for them. So to Ravi's question, I kind of like try to figure out, okay, who's near the top of their board at certain positions, and are they winning those head-to-heads for the most part, or are they right there? And so that's how I guess, and then you dive into the film, of course, and see what you like and you don't like as much as you can. As I always consider myself still a layperson. I don't try to talk X's and O's over everybody because I'm not capable of it. But there's stuff on film you like with some guys and stuff you're like, I'm not quite as sure about him. But I do think this staff is very good about the groundwork part of figuring out this guy has the traits. We think that he can be a top level player. And as Rhule has said, they're not going to go after somebody if they don't think that person actually has the capability down the line to be like an NFL type player. So they're not going to worry about what our rankings are on a guy or if he's rated at all. If they feel like he has the right, ingredients, that they feel like they have enough, of a spreadsheet on how they want to do it, that they're going to trust that. And I think they are pretty good at that. So I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt with those player evals. And then you see if they can win it when it gets down to 2 or 3 teams that are in the hunt.
It's interesting, BC, because I think, Nebraska's been bitten by this a ton where, Kelvin Obit, the list goes on and on, Noah Carpenter, Brunau, I mean, just run them on down, right? Where Nebraska's early, whatever happens, and, you'll get the pushback, well, Nebraska's got to land some of these guys. And I'm like, well, no bleep, right? It's like, but you can't change how you do business. The only thing that you can hang around on is your process and your eval, and then hope you win enough games where at some point, if Nebraska's got 9 or 10 wins, then you probably do get a David Sanders, right? If Nebraska wins 9 games this year, and you go back to recruit CJ a year from now, he could say yes a lot quicker, or however that works. BC, don't you think Nebraska operates well within the confines of knowing that they have to win in order to close the door on some of these guys? And if they do know that, should they be deterred from trying?
No, and that's the thing is that there's time left. Like whatever this sits at the end of June, as you say, like if Nebraska has a season where they win 9 or 10 and they make that jump and they're in the conversation for like the CFP and stuff like that, they're going to end up with a solid 26 class. I'll guarantee it. Of what they want. Maybe it's smaller a little bit than we're used to because of just the framework of what we're dealing with now. But it'll be a solid class. And the biggest thing I've taken from this June also is if they can hit at a high clip with what we might consider some under the radar guys or whatever, however we're describing this 26 class, they are, I think, further along with 27 and 28 than I remember.
I will say that. I agree.
Yeah, with Nebraska being with other classes like 2 or 3 cycles down the road. And a big part of that was that first weekend. You go back to the 7v7 showcase, the Huddle Futures Forum. I mean, there's like 20 guys at that Futures Forum who are like top 75 players, if you want to talk about ratings, like in the 27 and 28 classes that are visiting Nebraska way earlier than they would, in previous years. And they were really impressed by it. Like every review was a very high level review of what Nebraska has to offer. And so if you have that in those kids' brain already and you make the jump this year, I think that's a nice combination that's going to bode well for them. So much of this does come back to now. I think as we are in year 3 of Rhule, like get a couple more results that you want in the win column, and I think kids are going to notice that. And I think there's also some good peer recruiting going on where they're being told like you got to check this place out. It's not exactly what you think, and once they get here, it does tend to leave an impression. So. I'm not panicked by where it's at. I am understanding of the fact that some people, this isn't like, at June when you only have 5 commits and it's not how maybe you've seen it some years. You're a little nervous and that's fine. But I would tell people to let it play out a little bit.
Yeah, BC, I think it's interesting. Is this too myopic to think, especially as you look at the youth? Ravi's counted, I don't know how many times. Of the total roster spots and the lack of seniors and juniors. It's a young roster. And if Nebraska plays well, they don't really they can continue to use the portal to supplement and not supplant, because that would mean that their development plan is working, as is their talent eval. If the season doesn't go the way that they want it to, then you could probably see them hitting the portal for more immediate help. Flawed at all? Or that's got to be how they do it based on how this roster's built. It just looks like they have a plan. Now they just have to put it in place.
No, you explained it really well there. And that's why, like, I don't sit with too big of an opinion on where the recruiting ranking is right now or that. Because your point and Ravi's point, like, one, it's not going to be a bigger class. Bigger classes help you in the recruiting rankings. So you just have to make sure you maximize what you get, knowing you aren't going to have the quantity, but also you can, as you say, supplement it. And that's what I was kind of trying to say with my first answer, which wasn't the most artful, is that, this could be a class where maybe it sits like in the 40s or 50s. But if you really like the guys you have in a smaller class, and then you need to add just a couple pieces to it to kind of finish it off, maybe that's through the portal. I think we're still trying to figure out a little bit how to judge that, like, I don't think it's as easy as just always looking at just the high school recruiting class anymore. You gotta see how it all comes together. Like maybe you like 10 guys that are out of the high school ranks, and then there's like 3 guys that really fit well that are portal guys that add to it, and you're like, okay, I like how that all came together now when I see the whole picture. That's why we're watching it's like if you go on the street and you're watching a street artist, we're just like in the beginning part. You just started, you don't know what he's doing with it yet. You have to wait till that picture's complete.
BC, do you wonder at all, like, when talking about Nebraska's approach to recruiting and things like that, obviously it seems like Nebraska has a certain way they want to go about their business, right? And they try and cater that a little bit to each guy's personality. But I don't know. I look at like the CJ Brownell situation, and I look at like David Sanders Jr. last year, or like obviously there was something there that appealed to those recruits on some level. But at the end of the day, with David Sanders, it's like, okay, Nebraska's too far from home for what I care about. And with CJ, maybe it's a far from home thing. Maybe it's an NIL thing. Like, guys' priorities are going to be different. It seems, I don't know, I'm having a hard
Nebraska,
time.
you don't want them to play the variable game?
Yeah, I don't want them to play the reactionary game.
Yeah.
Like I don't want them to, like, if we like the process, and kind of a side note here about the process, like, I do find us kind of find it funny that we love the eval and the offer before everybody else on CJ Brana, but on all these other guys, then their evals must be off just because nobody else has come calling after it. Like, so I struggle with that sometimes too. But it just feels like, and I know fans are going to be more reactionary than coaches, but like it almost feels like fans want the coaches to be as reactionary as they are, and I don't totally understand that.
Well, it's a good thing that coaches aren't. You can't have that. You got to have just a consistency and a belief in your process that, you're not going to overreact just because every kid, as you mentioned, is going to have different variables as to why he decides one way or the other. Some kids want to be closer to home. Some kids want to get as far away from home as possible. I mean, we see that locally, and we see that in other states and how guys process it. I would say, like, let's just use CJ Brownell as an example. Nebraska recruited that one great. I mean, they really did. Like, and I know I mean, they got in before most. They saw a prospect with better traits or emphasized traits that they like before others actually did that are even closer to the prospect. So you got to give Husker staff credit for that. I think they put a good foot forward even last week when he was on the OV, and it was felt that it was enjoyed by him, and there was a real shot still. You did all you can with that legwork and stuff, and sometimes it goes the other way on you. But that doesn't mean you throw your hands up, say, "Oh, we got to readjust." It's one kid's decision, and you wish him well. And you never know what can come back around again, too, right? I mean, in this day and age, so you always want to maintain those relationships. Because sometimes you get a second crack at guys. So I think just using him as an example, it kind of stings that that one went against Nebraska. But that's an example, actually. He's a good example of how you want to do it. And you just keep doing it, and some of them are going to fall your way. And so that's what I think about it.
Yeah, it's just funny whether we're getting Florida State commits to come visit or – Nayland Scott's coming back around. Cooper coming back around. It's the recruiting. We're so fickle with it. We're not real happy with CJ's decision yet. We're willing to be excited about other guys that are committed elsewhere coming to take visits. At some point, we just have to understand that commitment is pretty
loose term.
It's pretty fluid, right?
Yeah, it's a.
I mean, this weekend is full of guys that are committed
other places. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, anybody who is following like CJ Brownell's recruitment and has known for like a couple months that this was like a race that was on, right? We didn't this wasn't a deal where it's like, oh, that's stunning, that he decommitted. I think he even in interviews was pretty clear, like he was talking like he wasn't committed, even though we were labeling him as that. So, so I guess last night it didn't jar me because like he did an interview like in March where he's like, yeah, these are my 4 or 5 final schools and Nebraska's one of them. And some people are like, hey, wait, aren't you committed to Nebraska? I was like, that's recruiting. He's this is going to play out and this is wide open still. So last night's result, it's okay to be disappointed because he's a good prospect, I think. It's one guy. I think Nebraska recruited him pretty well. You take that and you go forward. And like you said, Damon, there's a bunch of guys visiting that other schools are trying to hang on to. I mean, and there was a good recruit.
I mean, Florida's got Larry Miles. Arizona State's got Scott Cooper's commit.
You know,
I mean,
Zion Robinson is a good player that popped in the other day that visiting, and I just think
it's a nice little
got a good list
surprise.
still. Yeah, they have a nice group of names here, so let's see what they do with it. I think there's a couple that are going to pop, still from last weekend, and that how it goes. There's emotions when someone leaves, and then there's going to be like a jolt, like everybody got their caffeine when someone commits, like on Thursday or Friday or something, and raises their hand, and on it goes. So that's recruiting, the ups and downs of it, I guess.
So how do you think, with all the innuendos about Dillingham, I have a hard time believing it, and I get it. There's been some overtures that ASU is not happy with when guys take visits elsewhere if they're committed, but he is also the same coach that won the country over when they were the feel-good story, talking about guys that he knew were leaving and wanted to enter the portal, but he wanted to give them every opportunity to play if they wanted to, right? Remember, that's the same coach, right?
Yeah. I mean, I like Dillingham a lot, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you're always like in the certain situation, if you have a guy and he's committed to you, you're always hoping he's not going to take those other visits. And so on a specific one, you might have that kind of take where it's like, why is that guy visiting elsewhere? But then there's another guy who's visiting your campus who's committed to another school, and you're fine with it. But I think in the case of Nayland Scott, who's supposed to visit Nebraska this weekend, as far as we know.
Mm-hmm.
He's had that visit to Lincoln planned for a while. I mean, so he did commit to ASU, and you kind of wondered, was that going to shut down all visits? But that doesn't always go that way, I think. And I don't mind that with a kid who had his plans for the summer in certain situations where he makes a decision, but it's also like, let me do my due diligence like everybody else around the country that's in my age group and take a couple visits just to make sure. And I think you got to respect that to some degree. I mean, they get a number of them they can take. Let a guy compare and contrast and get that in front of his eyes. And so I know this, when Nebraska gets someone on campus, if he's committed or elsewhere or not, there's a feeling like you never know what can happen, because it's, obviously they're going to see what this place has to offer with facilities and stuff like that, and it can change people's minds. So we'll see. And OVs are different than just regular visits too. I think when some of those guys get a full like 2 days and they go through like the nutrition stuff and they just go through all the different categories, I think that's where Nebraska does really well with the recruiting with people. It really is a team effort.
Go ahead.
So BC, this is interesting. How would you? So you and Schaaf or you and Bruns are competing for the same thing for different institutions, but you guys are extremely close. How often do you think we'll see these Florida State, Nebraska battles as Rhule has to go head to head against a guy that he would probably tell you is as good at what he does as anybody he's ever been around, with guys like Evan Cooper? I mean, that's got to be weird, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I would think so. It's got to be ongoing though, too, right?
Yeah, because it ain't going anywhere. He's got his Florida guys down there too now with Simpson and Addison.
Well, I mean, and you see this with Texas Tech as well. Like, there's that crossover between coaches where you look at players the same way, and you're really competitive, but you also know that person evaluates in a way that you respect, like is going to see prospects maybe in a very similar line that you do. And so that it is like a fascinating sort of sidebar to all this, because you have so many coaches at FSU connected to Nebraska, and then of course in the same class right after, there are these head-to-heads that are going on. And
I mean, Coach Rhule had to know that CJ is going to run into Cooper.
Yeah, it's not a surprise, and you just got to keep going with like, this is what we have to offer here. We'll develop you. I do think it's going to be important for Nebraska in the next year or two to keep putting more people in the league. I think that's a big deal. Like as you get into year 3, 4, 5 of Rhule, like you're going to want to see more NFL guys, and that matters to these players and stuff like that. But there's still a track record that Rhule and his staff have that they can point to, even from Baylor, about how many guys they developed that got to the next level, that got second contracts. And you can put that in front of guys, say, we're doing the same thing here. We got a younger roster in some spots, but these guys are developing to be that next crop of guys that play on Sundays, and you can be that too. And you just got to stay consistent with that message. And, Florida State or whoever is probably trying to say the same thing. But, I think that Nebraska, has a lot to offer, obviously, and so that they should feel like they can be on an even playing field when it comes to going after a kid.
Seem weird to you that Brownell Witt hasn't come for an official?
A little bit, yeah. I just don't know where that one stands completely. He's going to really – I mean, it's going to be a big year for him, obviously, to show what he's got coming off the injury. And so that's another one that he's right now listed in the class, but you're kind of keeping an eye on. And so tough deal for him. That injury, I think, was a difficult setback, and you always feel for kids when they get that sort of like, especially in that year, right? Like that when you're kind of like in that junior season, when you kind of have to confirm you're the player that people think they are. And obviously there's a new wide receivers coach and all that, but I am a little surprised there hasn't been a visit, but that's another one you circle and keep an eye on that one.
Do you? I say no, but don't go by me because this is super knee jerk. I don't think there's a heightened sense of urgency for a guy like Darian Jones based on what C.J. Brunau did. I think Darian Jones was going to be his own deal anyway. Are you making that correlation?
You would know better than I.
But actually, I haven't done any fact finding. It's just a fresh opinion. I'm shooting you straight.
Yeah.
And I don't. Can I just say this real quick, BC? I don't want to talk to Darian like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like. We just have fun, and I don't want to talk to him about recruiting. He's never asked me about recruiting. That's not my place. He's got his sphere of influence. We just talk ball and life and having fun. We don't talk about recruiting.
Yeah, I think that from what I know, I think that those guys, those Jones guys, have a good head on their shoulders, and so I don't assume anybody else's decision is going to speed up his walk more than it needs to be or whatever, and I think that's good. Like so. Obviously Nebraska's right there. I know Iowa's put in a good word with them, and he's got a decision to make, but I don't see like yesterday's news connecting to him. I really don't. Like it's just like it's got to feel right for him, and obviously his brother's there, and that can be a really cool thing, and sometimes guys want to do their own thing, a little different, and so I get that.
And they're definitely polar opposites. Make no mistake about that. I watched Darian spin about 6 balls off the ground yesterday, which might be equivalent to the number of touchdowns he had. And I don't think I could get Donnie to say boo to anyone. You know what I mean? Like they're completely different people.
Yeah.
6 might actually be low. He broke out a nice little samba dance. Right. He broke out a Victor Cruz yesterday against Millard South. It was incredible.
Yeah. I haven't talked to Darian. Schaefer's talked more with Darian than I have. I talked to Donnie some when he was being recruited, and my biggest thing is to not mix up their names whenever I'm writing about one, because I always feel like I'm going to write the other guy's name accidentally. I don't think I've done it yet, but that's always my main fear.
BC, I'll let you go on this, but just a little thought exercise here for you. There's only 34 of the 129 people on Nebraska's roster that are juniors or seniors.
Wait, one more time?
34 juniors and seniors on a 129-man roster.
I know it was in the 90s.
That means that if Nebraska has the same transfer class that they had this year, and I'll even take out the specialists, be 14 people, Nebraska could not sign a single high school recruit and still be over the 105 person limit.
Yep. I'm glad you found the number, because when we started,
Well, it's been bugging him since people get mad. So then he goes into prove it mode.
Yeah, because I mean, they could sign 8 guys and still be over on numbers, and if you only sign 8 guys, you're gonna have like a 60th ranked class at best, and people are gonna lose their minds like their class is ranked 60th. It's like they don't need any more guys.
You're going to see me write about this in the next day or so, and it's going to seem like I'm copying your paper. But when we started this conversation from the first question, the whole segment I was kind of thinking about, and I figured, knowing you're always like fact checking, like looking at something while we're doing it, because I'm boring that way. But I'm glad you gave the numbers, because that's the big point here. It's like, this is just going to be a smaller class, and we'll see how it comes together. You want to hit at a high clip like always, but obviously it's not going to be as highly rated because you're just not going to have a large quantity. And that's why I say have some patience, because it's not like they have 5 commits right now and it's the old days where you got to get to 24. You know
what, B? It's not you have to get the guys you want. Okay. Yes. So, and it doesn't, and I say that generally, because of course, even if it's a plan B, you need to want them. As long as you want them and don't feel compelled to take them, you're going to be okay, which is why I keep saying you have to have a sound recruiting philosophy. How it births itself in terms of results is always going to be a crapshoot. But you have to be able to have 10 toes down and get the guys you want. Because if you're loosey-goosey and you're knee-jerky and you're reactionary, it leads to panic. And that's when you get fillers and people will compare you to some former head coaches. Like, as long as you're getting the guys you want, and that may have varying degrees, you're going to be okay.
I mean, BC, you would have a better idea of this than I do, because you
that makes sense?
Live in that recruiting world a little bit. But to DB's point, like, how many schools in the country actually get their plan A at most spots in their recruiting class?
Probably 7 to 10.
Right? Yeah. Like, it's a pretty small number. Almost everyone else.
Even Georgia fights with guys.
That's what I mean, right? Like, Georgia didn't get their plan A at quarterback last year because he's at Nebraska, right? So you can't sit there and tell me, like, oh, if you don't get their plan A, like, I believe CJ Brawner was their plan A. Like, that's what they wanted in that class. They might have plan A1s or A2s. They might have plan Bs or Cs. But the point is, almost no one in the country gets their plan A at most of the spots in their recruiting class. And so I really struggle with this, they're just going to fill up the class now. It's like, no, they don't have to. They have guys, if they like the guys on the roster already, which I'm led to believe they do, otherwise they wouldn't be on the roster anymore. Like, I'm having a really hard time with getting too worked up about one cornerback decommit.
The biggest thing.
He is a good player. You could say that. No, he's a good player. He's a good player.
I'm not downgrading CJ at all. It's just this is not a sky is falling thing for me. It seems like it is for other people.
The biggest thing to take from this whole conversation is the number you gave 1 minute ago. What, 34 juniors and seniors? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a roster that's full. They feel like they're developing guys right now, but there's a lot of guys that are, sophomore or less. It's just going to tweak your numbers. It just is. And so you take that point, then you take Damon's point. Like, you can't just have fillers. You can't
don't
have guys
settle.
that you have to squint at to, like, convince yourself. And we've seen that before here. And that might have been okay in a different time. I don't think it works as well now. Like, with the roster numbers going the way they are, you have to really, like, when you feel like you can stand on the table for a guy like this. This is what we want, and this is why we want him. And this guy, I think that the aspect that's so huge in this too is those guys that you feel just like want to saturate themselves with football. Like, they love it so much. When you talk about development, you have to have that guy who wants to really truly be a sponge for the game and wasn't just the best at it in high school because he was a great athlete and he kind of likes it. I think that component is so huge right now. is the guys who want to study it, and it's like their favorite thing in the world, no doubt. And they're gonna want to learn everything they can about it, and you got to find those guys.
Yeah, and on one of your company's publications on April 28th, BC, was that a long time ago? April 28th?
Yeah, in
April,
some ways,
April 29th, April 30th, in succession. You know what the general headlines are? Current Nebraska recruiting target commits to Arizona State. You know who that guy is? That'd be Nayland Scott, right? It is June 18th, I think. And guess who's coming back to Lincoln? That wasn't even that long ago.
We're not even waiting for Williams in one area a year later.
That's why you have to be. That's why you do your due diligence and try to shoot your shot. Like, you stick to the script, because you just never know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was April 30th.
Yeah, there's time. So, but yeah, people need to patience. Let's see where it goes. The numbers aren't going to be as heavy. They're going to have.
Yeah, it won't be sexy. That's for sure.
Yeah, I never thought the 26th class was going to be that way.
He told us in the spring they were going to be nitpicky. He all but said we're going to be nitpicky.
Yeah.
You know, it was cool because it gave him a chance to talk to navigating the times, but he said, yeah, unless you're a guy that doesn't have to believe in not wanting to go back to kids and tell them something different than when you told them, we're just going to have to continue to do our due diligence. Like, he was letting us know.
You know what? If you're standing up there on early signing day with a class that's ranked 52nd, but they won 9 or so games or more, people kind of let that go, won't they? I mean, it goes back to the season. So, I mean, you got to think about the calendar and how it's going to work out, win a few more games, and people are going to, I think, kind of nod their head with a trusting thought of where it's headed, no matter where that class ends up in the rankings and all that.
That's our guy, Brian Christopherson, Husker247. BC, appreciate the time as always. Good stuff.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, BC.